Okay, roll call.
Brett.
Here.
Robert.
Here.
Becky. Here. Tanya. Here. Libby. Here.
I declare we have a quorum. Can I get a motion to approve last week's minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Ayes have it. Okay, new business, Main Street.
Do we need to approve that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's not on there. I'll make a motion to approve the budget workshop meeting minutes as presented.
I second. Oh, I wasn't there. Sorry.
No.
You can still second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Okay, new business, Main Street special event, Elizabeth Wyatt. Is there Elizabeth Wyatt out there in the audience?
Do I need to go to the microphone?
No, I think you'll be fine, unless somebody has an objection out there.
Anyone?
Okay.
Anyone? Okay, so, as you guys, I'm sure you're familiar with, Treats on Main. The shops give out candy on the Saturday on or around Halloween. And, last year we had about 800 to 1,000 kids and families come through. It was huge, and probably because of COVID and all of that, but, Larry, my neighbor, and I stood next to each other and we're like, we should probably close the street down. They were really safe, but you know, people like to fly down Main Street anyway. Well, then I got a phone call from Lisa Reynolds. She's the executive director of the farm, which is the Fortville area resource mission. And they are the food pantries that came together last year. And they wanted to do a outreach to let the community know of the different free services that are available to them. So she and I are brainstormers, and we came up with this idea to shut down Main Street, walk during Treats on Main from 10 to 2 on October 30th. And the farm would invite nonprofits to come and the churches to come and offer free games and rides. Like Fort Naz has the barrel train, and the Catholic Church has a bounce house, and everybody can provide something free, and the kids can win prizes and things like that. The town wanted to do a touch the truck, so we thought, oh, we could have a fire department there, and they have an antique fire truck maybe.
Township.
Yeah, township, and maybe the police if we have enough people to provide a car and some things. But then we thought if it's called the Farm Community Fair, why not have antique farm equipment there to include the community, have a pie eating contest, have, what was the other fun thing that we're doing? Oh, petting. Yeah, we're gonna have a petting zoo, and the parks have agreed to do a hayride. And we're gonna do a pumpkin decorating contest. So, and the pie eating contest is Jane's Pies from Fox Garden. There are no vendors that are selling anything. It's to encourage people to go into the shops and to go into the restaurants. So no food vendors, nothing like that. But a real quick in and out little festival. What do you guys
Sounds
think?
like fun.
It's just 10 to 2 is the time.
10 to 2 is what we've always done at Treats on Main.
Seems like it needs to be longer than that.
Well, don't, Jake Burgess will get upset with us if we have it any longer.
Yeah.
He's already not happy with, he's the only one that has said he's not happy with us closing Main Street down for any events, so. But I figured 10 to 2 is not
Yeah.
really impeding on
Yeah, that's
anyone's.
like I heard it. Okay.
So we, the board, Kelly's here as a representative of the board. We don't have it signed yet from their board, but the churches have insurance that they're talking about getting covered.
We're trying to figure that out, yeah.
Yeah, and we just need to learn if we need, for an event like that where we're not offering food or anything like that, do we need to have the porta johns? Do we need to put out the trash can, like what do we need to do? You listening to me?
Yeah, I'm listening. Sorry. There again, if you don't have the porta johns, how many people do you think will come?
Well, without the event, we had easily 800 to 1,000.
Yeah. you
So
probably
I'm
gotta-
thinking
you're
with
gonna have
all the
to.
people, that's what I figured. So we'll probably get a couple of porta johns. We'll need the street blocked off, and hopefully could set up between 8 and 10 to have it ready.
Okay.
if that's cool.
Do you have any questions?
I don't.
I don't either. Do I have a
I'll
motion?
make a motion to approve the special event permit from Fortville Area Resource Commission as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Libby,
Thank you.
or Elizabeth.
That's a formal name.
Libby, can I put you down as abstaining since you presented
Yes.
it?
Okay, moving on to the next is water plant DOT financing. Buzz. You look comfortable there for a second.
Good evening, everyone. I think, I know we've had a few meetings with the committee and some discussions maybe offline, but we've got actually two projects. The big one obviously is the water treatment plant project, and the cost estimates are in the $11 million range. That we sounds sticker shock a little bit, but I think with the growth that we're getting, and we were able to talk to the folks at Greenfield Banking Company who've helped us. That's where the city does its banking, and they're willing to do a bond anticipation note for the full project, and which is a shorter term. It's not the long-term financing, but it gives us 3 or 4 years to add our customer base, to collect capacity fees and connection fees. And we've run a few, I handed out just some illustrations. I think if you go to like page 3 of the illustration, it sort of shows you right now we are at, our current revenues have grown to about $1,250,000 a year with the growth we've already experienced. We have enough cash in the capacity fund to completely pay off our 2009 SRF bond issue, which we would probably propose to kind of do something like that, to just have the one new debt outstanding when we move forward with the water treatment plant wellfield project. Because I think we're paying 3.3% on that SRF bond right now. I don't think you can make anywhere near that. Invest in those funds. It's nice to have that big chunk of cash in that capacity fund, and there'll still be some cash in there, and there'll be more cash coming in. We've already added over 100 new customers this year through the first 7 months, and we're expecting to have at least another 50 more between now and the end of the year. So that's a tremendous shot in the arm for our customer base. And at this point in time, looking forward, we think 120 new homes a year is a reasonable expectation. You know, God forbid things don't flip-flop, you know, like what happened 15 years ago or so. But you know, if we get a couple more years of that level of growth under our belt, then we've got a much larger customer base to spread the cost of the new plant over. Plus, we'll have additional cash to buy down the long-term debt, you know, in 4 years. We've talked to Greenfield Bank about a 4-year term. You can go out to 5 years, but they felt comfortable doing that without us having to pre-authorize a rate increase at this time. We can push that out a couple of years. And as we get, you can see in the illustration here, we projected that by 2025 would be about the time we would likely hit, you know, need to do the long-term financing. That in between now and then, our customer base would grow, our operating revenues would grow by about another almost 200,000 a year more. So we may be, right now, an average water bill for 4,000 gallons a month is $22.70. You're really on the low end across the state, really. You've got some of the lowest water rates around, and based on the assumed customer growth that we're And hopefully these are conservative numbers, you know, we think they are right now based on what we're seeing. That between now and 2025, when we would pull the trigger on the long-term debt, we might only need to raise rates about $6 a month. And we can phase that in. We don't have to do anything for a couple of years. We could phase that in gradually. But we're still gonna have less than $30 a month for our projected rate for a 4,000 gallon customer, which that's sort of the number they use at the state for all the grant programs and so on. Plus, we are hopeful that we'll get some of the SWIFT grant funds. We're in line for that. We'll see what we get there. We know we've got 800,000 already from the ARP funds. So we'll probably be able to use, assuming we would put all that towards this project, you know, we'd probably be able to start paying down on the ban if we wanted next year. But for right now, we've been working with the $11 million number with the bank. They're comfortable with that. I did have a lunch last Friday with some folks at Key Bank who do a lot of, you know, some of their long-term municipal bond people. They, you know, they're not your local bank here necessarily, but they would want to see that rate increase right now. So that's a big difference in dealing with your local bank. Right. And they're willing to let us move forward without having to put in that long-term rate right up front. We can push that out a couple of years. And I think that fits in nice with what, you know, having opted out of the IURC just about a year ago, not quite a year ago. You know, nobody wanted to just turn around and have to have a rate adjustment in water for some time. And this really helps us. This type of financing really helps us out in that regard. So then I think on the second to the last page shows sort of we start with 2020 and we look at the revenue requirements of the utility. We've shown the actual numbers for the first 7 months of this year. We assumed that between now and the end of the year, we would do this $11 million bond anticipation note and not have to, you know, then we assumed that perhaps in 2023, we might start phasing in some gradual adjustments, maybe 10% a year for 2 or 3 years. And again, we'll be watching what the actual growth levels are in the interim time and so forth. But we want to keep our bond coverage ratios up around 150% if possible to make sure we get good interest rates on the long-term financing. We don't know what rates will be in 4 years, but you know, sometimes it's not always the cost of money, it's the availability when you need it. And by not having to rush through the long-term financing right now, we can capture several more years of growth in the customer base, which I think fits really well into the hand that you all want to play at this point. Then the last page just shows that existing debt payment schedule on the 2009 bonds. We've already made the January 1st, 2021 payments, so we're down to about $1.2 million roughly on that. You know, we could wait till the end of the year and we probably got 2/3 of our bond payment accumulated already for next year. And we still have a fair amount of working capital in our operating fund as well. We still have about $1 million in the operating fund. So we're not, even by paying off this bond using the majority of the capacity fee funds, we're not leaving ourselves in a place where we're going to be short of cash for things to, you know, keep the operations going. So, you know, I think things are working out really quite well with respect to that water financing. So I don't know Dennis Otten is here, Alice's partner. I don't know if you want to talk at all about if it's appropriate for him to talk about some of the time. We've got some timetable information and steps that would need to occur. We also have the town hall / park project to kind of touch on too, which, after we complete the water one, I'm not sure if that's on the agenda for tonight too, but we're prepared to talk about that as well.
That's the town hall.
I've got it. I think you've all met Dennis before.
Yeah. Let's see, there's the water and there's.
Do you have any questions for Buzz?
Robert, I do.
Yeah.
Buzz, I think when you were here last, I asked about options of what it would look like without drawing down the entirety of the capacity funds that we have on. I understand what you're saying as far as you're comfortable with that, but as far as what that would do to the potential bond amount and the annual payment, do you have something, or is that something you can work and send?
Yeah, I mean, we'd be shifting, we're paying off 10-year debt. We take out 20-year debt and less of it, but I think if we kept the 10-year debt, that's gonna make the rate impact higher. But yeah,
I'm just curious,
Yeah.
I mean, it's spread out over that number of years. Without getting into the calculator and figuring that out, what's that gonna do?
to the total interest, you mean,
Well, total interest and
and the rates,
yeah. Well, not just the rates, but the annual, what's the annual? cost?
annual revenue
I don't
requirements.
know that it's gonna be significant.
Well, for 10 years, it'll be more because,
Correct, and you're right, that the smart play on that would be draw it down because we're not earning as much, so I'm just curious, just wanna know where
yeah, I could probably run that while Dennis is talking.
Okay.
Try to come up with a number.
Thank you.
Good evening. It's good. It's been a while since I've been here. I'm trying to think the last financing that we worked with you all on was 2017. Was it the MPO project? Am I saying that right?
I think so, yeah.
But anyway, whenever town needs to borrow money, you've got to do bond financing, and that's what I do. We get involved with that, and we draft up the bond ordinances or resolutions, and we'll talk a little bit here about the bands. And the bonds, and then I've got another timetable that I provided you with that would be for the town hall financing. And the purpose of those proceedings is to ensure that you can get the debt service levy and that you'll need to pay those bonds. So the first timetable that Buzz mentioned is to authorize the waterworks bond anticipation notes. And by statute, whenever we do bands, you have to complete all the processes that you would have done to do a bond issue as well. So the idea is you're telling the bank, hey, we promise that we're going to issue the bonds to pay you off. And so what we would do is draft up a bond ordinance that would have all the covenants and the bells and whistles that you would have to go out and be able to issue those bonds. But there's a provision of that bond ordinance that will say, hey, we can also issue these short-term bond anticipation notes in the meantime to provide interim funding for the project. And like that Buzz mentioned, there's a 5-year term limit on those. You can't go any more than 5 years. So it'll say that in the bond ordinance. But that bond ordinance will also have the flow of funds for the bond. So we would do that bond ordinance once, and then 3 or 4 years from now, when it comes time to do the bond issue, there won't be any council authorization required because you'll have already done that with a bond issue. Unless something were to change, let's say at the time you wanted to issue more bonds or you wanted to pledge some other revenues, but all things being equal, council action will be done, and it's just a matter then of going out to the market with a bond issue. So I've got on the timetable here, if you all want to move forward with it, an introduction date of September 7th for the bond ordinance, and then adoption on the 20th. If there was an interest in expediting the schedule, and I'll say this as well when we talk about the next financing, if the council is willing to suspend the rules and adopt it at one meeting, we can probably compress the timing on this and get funding locked up earlier. I know there's an interest with a lot of projects. We're seeing concerns about costs going up and the ability to order equipment. And that's kind of like to know you've got your money in place before you really expose yourself on that. So getting through these processes is important. So that's something for you all to think about. But Buzz has already laid the groundwork with the bank. We'll have provisions in this bond ordinance that'll say they're on parity with your outstanding bonds, but it sounds like you may pay those off between after we do the bans and maybe before the bonds are issued. Part of the process would be once we get the ordinance adopted, we'll provide that to Greenfield Bank. They'll have counsel reviewing that. We've worked with them before. We'll also do the closing certificates, and then we kind of work with Buzz on the process of getting the money lined up and getting it put in place. Since you're not regulated by the IURC, it's abundantly easier than it would have been otherwise. Any questions on that process?
Robert, you have more experience in this. Typically on the bonds, how are they? Are they a percentage of the total amount, or is it like if you do a $3 million bond, it's the same as an $11 million bond? What is the cost in creating all that? That's
The short term, short-term financing is probably no difference in cost because it'd just be your bond counsel opinion, some the municipal advisor has work to do, but the issuance costs aren't very much. There'll be some, maybe the bank might have its lawyers look over the paperwork and so forth, but to just have a number to throw out there, probably around $70,000 to $100,000 to do, and it wouldn't matter if it was an $11 million bond anticipation note or $3 million,
that's just the going, how much it costs. Okay.
Now, when we get to the long-term financing, if we go out on the open market with a competitively bid deal, which is what we would anticipate with the water project, there would be some underwriting fees that would likely come into play and potentially some rating fees if we were to get a bond rating. And I think we would get a decent bond rating. I mean, we would get an investment grade bond rating. We're not going to get AAA, but we'll get a decent bond rating, BAA or better, maybe a AA or maybe an A- or something. It depends on how much coverage we can build into the rates at that time. The trade-off will be, if you have 200% debt coverage, you're going to get a lot stronger bond rating than if you got 130% debt coverage ratio. That'd be a factor in the rating process. And the other option is to find a sophisticated investor that would be willing to bid on the bonds, and you could do an unrated sale. A lot of the bank deals are unrated deals, and that cuts off some issuance expenses. But all those issuance costs, the underwriting fees and all that gets factored into the net interest cost when you calculate the net interest cost for the actual bond sale. You have coupon rates, but then you also have issuance costs that get factored into that overall. And what we would do in this scenario is probably just see where we are in 4 years and make the call of how best to address, like, for instance, if we only need a 10 or 12-year term, say we've had more growth than what we thought instead of a 20-year term, that might fit into a local bank portfolio a lot easier than a 20-year commitment. Generally, the banks don't like 20, 25-year deals. And, we may, on the park project, we may want to look at doing our long-term deal right up front, because on that one, we're going to be paying for that with a dedicated property tax levy. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but
I think, to jump in here, I think and we haven't chatted about it yet, but I think what Fritz is probably asking is the cost of the issuance and the underwriting of this bond going to be determined by the the amount that we borrow? Or is it basically just a flat rate?
Yeah, not as far as I think the bond council and our work wouldn't be, there, it's not a percentage-based fee on the bond issues, the size.
So I'm just curious, sometimes are we wasting money by doing all these little different bonds? And if it's a cost of, getting it done and so these bands, are they similar to the bonds that when we're banding stuff
They're short
together?
term, they're just short term, they're.
So we're paying
It's
the
not-
same amount of money for the bands as we're
No.
paying for the bonds, or are they?
It's probably less, I would say it's less for the band, and you wouldn't have it necessarily, since we would not be doing the band placement with, through an underwriter, we wouldn't have underwriting fees either, so, there'll be some, there is some duplication of costs, maybe 50 or 60 grand, but for the water project, buying that extra 4 years is, the ratepayers aren't gonna see that, and hopefully we're gonna have enough growth to, issue a lot less bonds than what we would have to issue if we were gonna do that bond deal today. But any of those underwriting costs would be calculated in the net interest rate, for the bonds. You got your coupon rate, but then any of those direct underwriting fees would add to the total interest cost as part of the total interest cost of the deal. And then,
Okay, no, I was just looking for the most reasonable, like, if I'm in business, I usually look for,
sure,
what is my true cost and do it this way or that way,
right.
and, do I
That's
save
really
more
why
money?
on the park and town hall deal, we're wanting to go ahead and do the long-term financing right up front to avoid that duplication of costs.
Okay.
It's a smaller deal, and probably we're looking at maybe a 15-year term there, I don't know the park equipment, how long that lasts, but we may be able to entice some sophisticated investors on that, because you're gonna have a property tax is the ultimate pledge on that, which is the best security from a bondholder perspective. And the amount that we need there is obviously quite a bit less than what we're looking at on the water bonds also, but so there, we think, we really don't need the ban for that project. We can go right to the long-term financing on that one and avoid that, duplication of.
Well, Robert and I were I left him a message, call me, but he's been busy, I've been busy, and I know he's had more experience in doing these different bonds and the best way to put it together in the past, so I'm just
No, those are
curious
excellent
what's the
questions.
best.
Yeah,
Those are excellent questions, and
I think one thing too you gotta look at is the water plant project is a not to exceed number. And by the time the project's done, then we'll know exactly what that's gonna be. When we do our long-term bond on what we spent and what we need to spend, rather than using that, worst case scenario and going up and getting a bond.
Okay.
Get a bond for 11 million, we get it done for 9.
and for my 2 cents for what it's
Sure.
worth is with the dynamic here, that's a large bond issue, 11 million for the town. And I gotta think, even if you guys adopted the rates right now, we'd wanna go to the rating agency to get you the very best interest rate. Those rating agencies may look at that and go, well, yeah, we think that's good, but there's not really an operating history there of the customers under those rates. And if you're wanting the money now to do it quickly, this is really probably the best way to do it. My experience has been when I see bans, it's typically a lot of times preliminary cost, you're not ready to construct the project, it's engineering and you've got design fees and things like that you're wanting to do. And then the other scenario is this kind of scenario where you've got an expanding system, you're adding customers and you want to have that growth, that window of time to add customers. So when you do your rate increase, it's not as impactful. But on top of that, when you go to the rating agency with that bond issue, you can go, you can actually see the growth that's occurred here and see what we've been able to do, and explain the story a little bit better.
The rated and then to put it in perspective, the rate adjustment today would have to be about twice as much as what we're projecting out in 4 years right now. So we think the bond anticipation note process for the water utility really fits your situation much better than having to do the rate adjustment today. And you'd have to show that the existing customer base can service the debt when you go to the long-term bonds. And but on property taxes, we'll get a dedicated levy from the Department of Local Government Finance. It does impact the circuit breaker a little bit because everybody's at the tax caps, especially after the township's fire bonds, that sort of blew the lid off of the tax cap. So customers aren't going to pay, your taxpayers are not going to pay any different than what they're already paying because they're already at the property tax cap. But what it'll do, it'll shuffle some of that pie around where we'll get more funding so that we can make the lease payment. But we'll get a little bit of we'll get probably about $36,000 less a year in usable property tax funds for the general fund. So but when you look at your total picture, you've got a pretty successful TIF program right now. And we haven't really touched on that for any of these things. We may want to think about clearing up the MPO ban, or if we want to take that out early. That was just done through general revenues, but we primarily had a pledge of $50,000 a year from the RDC plus the pilot payments that the utilities make to the town. Those are really the primary sources of repaying that. If it's the council of the RDC work out something where maybe they want to take that debt off the table between now and when we do the long-term water bond issue, that might be a favorable thing in the eyes of the creditors as they evaluate the town's credit, having been able to pay down a lot of these other debts. We've already paid off the old TIF bond a year or two ago, I think was the last time we had a levy for that. And at one point, I know that tax rate was up around a dime, I think. Then, in the end, it was down to, 3 cents or something like that, as the tax base grew and the amount that we owed went down. So did the tax rate, went down, but kind of thinking out loud here, but.
Yeah, right. One last question or comment on that. Missy, can you work with us on, I'd like to see when the time frame of the RDC and paying that off and when that would fit in nicely with this, because that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I think I think we've only got about another year or two left on that MPO ban anyway. And so, yeah, I don't know, do you budget that in with your budget since it's being paid for by RDC?
That's a bad question.
Pardon me?
That's
Okay.
a bad question.
But-
She does the budget, but
Whether you do or not, it doesn't affect, you're not levying a special property tax for that one.
No.
But you probably want to keep it in your budget. But
Any other questions? Thank you.
yeah, just
next one, or?
yeah, just kind of. I'll still get that number for you, Robert. As Dennis mentioned, he's got that timetable set up right now as though there were no suspension of rules or special meetings or any of this or that, but we could accelerate the timetable by, if everyone felt comfortable. I mean, these aren't nuances, these projects for the town council. if everyone felt comfortable on September 7th to suspend the rules and pass the bond ordinance in one night, that would accelerate some of the other steps that go along with setting up a lease financing, probably on the park and town hall project. That would help save a lot of time in getting to the point where we can have the cash in hand to proceed with construction on those projects in particular. On the ban, I think we can go to the bank in September. If we suspend the rules and adopt that on September 7th, we could move forward with the bond anticipation note very quickly. On the lease financing, there are some other steps that have to go through, and we did confirm, we had to find your gross assessed value number, not the net assessed value number, and that was the call that came through right before I was here, because on the lease, if we keep the total bond amount less than 1% of the gross assessed value, then it's a non-controlled project, and we did confirm that. Even if we did 2.6 million, this is the illustration I've got on the first page of that handout. But again, we assumed a 15-year payback on that. Just thinking that we probably don't want to have these out, and I use a very low growth of AV assumption in these numbers too. We could easily, with the rate that we're getting development here, we could, the growth rate may be 2 or 3 times what I've got.
Right, and I was just gonna mention that. So when you're looking at the options, Buzz, that doesn't have to be tonight. Can you do that one on a 10-year?
You want me to use a more aggressive AV growth rate, or
No,
just
I
leave it
mean,
at, I've used 2%,
well,
that's kind of
Oh, that's fine. And like you just said, it's likely gonna be more.
right.
And so at a 15-year, if we're all comfortable with the fact it's likely gonna be more, it's gonna be better than what you projected here.
Yeah.
What would it look like on a 10-year
Gotcha,
budget
gotcha.
or a 10-year
Yeah.
amortization? Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to get those.
Just an
Yeah.
option.
Yeah.
It'd be this if we went 15, it'd be this if we went 10.
On
Kind
the,
of like the other thing is if we didn't use it.
on the second page of that illustration, I tried to do a estimated, now there's a lot of moving parts when you're trying to estimate circuit breaker impact, and no matter what we do, it's gonna be different. But what I've done here is just sort of isolated things with where we are in 2021. We're getting hit with $378,000 circuit breaker loss. So out of our maximum levy, we're losing 378,000 off of the maximum levy this year. If everything else stayed the same and we just added on the additional tax levy for the lease rental bonds, our circuit breaker loss will go up to about 436,000. And you can see, all the taxing units get hit by that, but we got hit big time when the township fire department bonds were issued. Hopefully the growth in that tax base there, the township covers a lot more tax base than the town does. So as that goes down, everybody's circuit breaker losses will go down, just as our assessed value goes down, or I'm sorry, goes up, the circuit breaker loss will come down also. So, but that's just sort of a snapshot, because for the general fund budget, that's something that we do need to factor in to the that there are going to be potentially, if we publish to levy a tax next year, which I think we can do. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but and Dennis is going to be better at explaining the nuances of the lease financing. But You know, ideally, if we don't levy a tax next year to make payments on the park town lease financing, then we have to capitalize interest costs into the bond issue. But since we're gonna be occupying the town hall as it's being renovated, we can definitely justify lease payments there, and Dennis has some ideas on the park piece. And we may be able to do it consolidated now, since we know where our gross AV is gonna be more than what we have to have. We were looking at it, maybe having to split it into two lease. You know, we'd still maybe do one bond issue, but it'd be two separate lease agreements. We may not need to do the two separate ones, but
Just do this more, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be simplified.
But that was why my ducks started quacking. I was waiting for that call longer. Yeah,
Thank you, Buzz.
you bet.
I'll talk a little bit about this timetable. It's a little more involved, and I don't know how much y'all know about kind of lease financings and why we do them. I always, when I have this conversation, tell councils and board members, 99% of the school buildings out in Indiana aren't actually, the bonds aren't issued by the school corporation, they're issued by a holding corporation, a building corporation, that then leases the school building to the school corporation. Now, for all intents and purposes, the school corporation is paying the debt service on the bonds, it's their building. But the reason for that building corporation structure is because of our Constitution, which says that you can't issue more than 2% of your net assessed valuation in bonds. If you do, you exceed your debt limit. And some bright attorneys back in the 1950s said, well, if we're leasing a building, is that debt? And the Supreme Court said, well, no, that's not debt. And so now we have this lease financing mechanism. So because we're doing a tax levy, if we just did a town borrowing, like general obligation bonds, your debt limit, I think, is probably around $900,000. We wouldn't have enough. So we have to do a lease financing, and it's no big deal. This is how we do all lease financings in Indiana.
And that's not available debt limit, that's the total debt limit, because we've already got GO bonds outstanding for police cars and major equipment purchases that they've been using that. So we've probably only got a couple 100,000 of available GO debt limit.
Yeah.
So
So we soaked that out. So long story short, we have to do a lease financing. The procedures are a little bit longer than doing a waterworks ban. We have to have a public hearing, and then there's a 30-day objecting period on the lease itself. And we also have to have a leasing entity. Now, school corporations typically do a nonprofit building corporation. The best thing, I think, for cities and towns that they can do it, there's a statute that allows you to create what's called a redevelopment authority. It's a 3-member board. Members are appointed by the town council president. Council has to adopt an ordinance to create that entity. And we have that on the timetable here. We would then have the town just do a base lease with a redevelopment authority to lease over the town hall and maybe some roads. Joe, I'll talk to you about this, just to get assets under this lease. And then the redevelopment authority leases those to the redevelopment commission. And the redevelopment commission actually makes the payments. The redevelopment commission can levy the tax. And there's another method you can use, which is a building corporation. I don't really recommend that, because then we have to do we truly have to transfer fee simple title to the property to this building corporation. It just adds cost and expense for y'all, because then we have to get title insurance, we've got to get appraisals, and you already have a redevelopment commission. So we end up at the same place. It's a property tax levy. And we do this all the time. And to avoid this capitalized interest issue, there's one of the theories of lease financings is you can't pay a lease rental payment until you can actually use the facility, because otherwise then it's a debt. We know the town hall, it's up and running, so we can get some value out of that. But we can also put roads under the lease. They have value, even though that's not what we're financing. We just need to have something that has value that justifies the levy. So we do this all the time. We can take some roads. It doesn't change the use or character or anything like that. And when the bonds pay off, that lease is extinguished. That's the simplest method that we found, and it works very well. And the rating agencies are comfortable with that, banks, financial institutions. So long story short, this timetable to get through all the processes, and the reason we have to do this, by the way, why can't we just adopt an ordinance, go borrow 2.5 million? The reason is when you go to DLGF to get your levy approved, they won't approve it. They're gonna ask for the lease, they're gonna ask for these notices and showing that you've done all these things. And frankly, we wouldn't be able to find a buyer for those bonds if we took them, because they would see you had a debt limit issue. So we would go through these processes, and we think we could have them done by December 1. But as Buzz mentioned, if the council's willing to suspend the rules, and I mentioned this to Alex earlier, really, the redevelopment commission is fairly involved in this process. If we can get them to have some meetings on earlier dates, I've just been following what your calendar dates off your website are, but if they could meet earlier, we could probably shave 3 weeks off this timetable, maybe a little bit more. But that would help in kind of expediting the process to be in a position to close the bonds, and if you want to order equipment or do things under the contract, feel more comfortable about the timing of when you want to do that. I'll stop for a second. Are there any questions at all that you all have of me? And like Buzz said, this will be a bond issue. It won't be bans. And I will back up, kind of reiterate what you said. The reason we want to do this here is our funding source is not going to change. We're not counting on growth. We're going to get our levy. And there's no reason to do a ban on this. And I couldn't think of a reason you'd want to do a ban.
Bob, I did run the numbers on 10-year versus 15 on that, just because that was a simple test. The other one's a little more involved, but the lease payment would need to go up about $85,000 a year more for a 10-year payoff. And the tax rate impact would be just about 50% greater than what it would be without with a 15-year. But 15-year, there are some sophisticated investors, banks, and even maybe some individuals. We've got some connections with a few underwriters that will maybe deal with an individual, thinking of like Landon or some aggressive underwriter that may have some individual investor that, if that fits his need, there is an opportunity there to shortcut some of the traditional issuance costs. We'll look at that, obviously, make sure that we're getting the best deal for the town. But if that saves a lot of issuance expenses by doing a private placement, we have that opportunity with the lease financing. When we do an initial offering on the water utility bonds, we have to go through a competitive process that way, and that's a big enough deal where we're going to want to get ratings and do an official statement to market those bonds. That's where we run into some additional issuance costs on a bond issue that size, but hopefully, it pays its way by getting a better interest rate. This particular one, if we keep the term a little bit shorter, maybe 14 years, there are banks that are doing 15-year deals.
Sure. I was just curious as to not obligating us as long, but that's a significant impact to the tax rate. So
we'll be able to call the bonds early after 10 years. So we can always do that. So that's an option. But 10 years is kind of the conventional, redemption protection period for these types of deals. And so we can always flip it after 10 years but while the bonds are outstanding, we'll get a dedicated levy to service that debt. And
okay.
You might want to make on your smaller bond here that September 6th, council will not be meeting up. You got it right on this one, September 7th.
Oh, you know,
So if everybody.
I want to make that note. Thanks, Joe. That's Labor Day, isn't it?
Yep.
Are we looking to adopt something this evening, or is this just information?
Well, I think it's just information, but I suppose, I think we're just sort of wanting to kind of, I don't want to say get a green light, but get an indication of interest that you all are comfortable with this. It makes sense. So, because if we're sort of getting that message, what we'll do is we'll start preparing these proceedings for you. So that we would plan to kind of come back to you at the meeting. But we don't want to drop that, we don't want to do that and drop that stuff off you if kind of council's not ready or feeling uneasy about it.
The more, you do more of the lease rather than the building corporation, you said?
I'm sorry,
You do more of the lease, or the setting up through the RDC and the lease financing rather than the building corporation, you said?
oh, structurally?
Yeah.
When I can, I try to use that method. We can't always do it. For example, we wouldn't do it for a community that didn't have a redevelopment commission, and we couldn't really say that the asset was something that was sort of an economic development type purpose. Town halls and park facilities are clearly things you need for economic development. But, we could do a building court. Here's the other thing with a building court. We'd have to go out and get a petition signed by 50 or more taxpayers right now. And not a big deal for, I've got a project going in Wabash County right now for a jail, and it's been known about for a long time. We got those signatures, but for some smaller communities, that process itself can take a while. But you don't need to do that with a redevelopment.
Alex, recommendations on this? I mean,
I've worked with Dennis on these exact types of structures before. I mean, I think what he's presenting makes sense for the town. It's the way to go. It's straightforward. And from a timing and actual steps, it makes sense.
Well, I know that Reynolds is anxious to get started on the water plant
Right.
and some of the other projects, and actually looking at
Things are changing.
the park stuff and the town hall and everything. And I actually asked him to, let's wait till we get official, documentation, everything, telling them that they've got the job and bonds are all rolling and the council's all on board. So what do we need for the next council meeting to have all that stuff approved?
Yeah,
by the
really,
council?
I think Dennis was right, and Fritz, when we were on the phone with Buzz last week, I mean, really, I think from the council is getting a green light tonight for both Dennis to start his work as bond counsel and for preparing both tracks, or one if you want, and same for Buzz, and for his office to go ahead and start moving forward. And Dennis and Buzz will work together and hit these timeframes. And then to your question, Robert, recommendation, I think if the council's comfortable with it, like both Dennis and Buzz said, having 2 readings in the same night for these projects, these are things that we've been talking, or you've been talking about with the town for quite some time. So it's not something that I think anyone in the public would think was unexpected and would be caught off guard. And certainly it could help, even 3 weeks might help Doug and his team at Reynolds secure that, especially on the water plant side of things, secure better pricing so that we come in at $9 million instead of 11 or something. So moving as quickly as possible, I think
You get that,
makes a lot of sense. And of course, that we won't skip any legal steps that are required, but just you have the ability to do some things. 2 readings in one night on the 7th allows things to expedite. Joe and I can talk to the RDC about just instead of doing the 4th Thursday or whatever, 3rd Thursday, they just do all their business on a date that expedites things.
And then the 3-member board that I have to pick, do we have to advertise that, or can I pick a CPA, and do they need to be living in the town and all those other things?
They just have to be 18 years old. and they can be.
Do it.
I said, I just said that in confidence.
Right.
We don't need to advertise anything. It's entirely up to you. A lot of times I'll actually see council members being appointed or RDC members, sort of people from your own circles if you want them to be. And then other communities, I see them say, well, we kind of want to have an independent 3 people. If you do that, I mean, it kind of goes without saying, my recommendation is make sure you've got like-minded people. I don't want to say this is a straw entity, but for all intents and purposes, they're there for one purpose, and that is to be the issuer of the bonds and approve what needs to be approved. So you don't want to have issues with that. If you did, Brad, I would tell you, just go ahead and you can ask them and get a new member on there.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I mean, I'm okay proceeding with, it would just be a verbal recommendation, correct?
Yep.
For council and for Dennis and Buzz to proceed with the timelines that presented.
Okay.
I second.
I think it's just a kind of a, it's not necessarily a motion.
It's not a motion, it's just to move forward. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, with that too, do we still need to do an agreement, a written contract with Reynolds for both of these projects? Because before, I know the council approved them, or this is who we selected, but I don't think there's ever been any kind of contract.
Well, Doug's got, you
We're,
want to do that?
we're under the schedule to have, we've got a couple of projects that are within the whole that are really gonna help us accelerate the schedule. One of them is, the water treatment plant is working with Duke Electric to relocate all that overhead electrical lines. So if you deal with Duke, which you probably do, you know you have to get in their queue as early as possible to get work done in the future. It's about $1 million worth of work. So we're trying to get in the queue. Our plan is to have a construction contract to you on the 7th as well. The other thing I'd like to do is on the sport lighting is during this type of weather, I can get in and do my demo, get all the wood poles out, get the electrical cleaned up, get ready for installation. So those are my 2 kind of accelerated projects that I'd like to start on. The other thing is that we talked about, there's 2 more steps in the award of the bot program. Are you going to talk about that under your session?
No, you go ahead.
So you have to do an advertisement that says you have an intent to have a public hearing. I gave you some verbiage on what that looks like. And then there's a resolution that needs to be passed on the 7th as well. It just says you're officially awarding the bot program to us in a public hearing. Pretty simple standard procedure. So those are a couple of steps. But that's our plan, is to be back here on the 7th. Construction contracts all agreed upon, scope of work defined, pricing in place, guarantee maximum. We'll get to work shortly after that.
I would like to say, Doug has been working. I mean, he's anxious. He's in here all the time. I hear from him almost every day. And I'm trying to say, like, wait a minute, let's get this in writing and make sure the council.
The way
on board.
things are, the costs and everything are just all over the place. I can
Yeah.
understand why you feel that way, because it's just, things are happening and it's gonna keep happening.
And I appreciate that. I just didn't want to move too much and not have the council's blessing. Make sure we're all.
We gotta take advantage of this weather too.
Yeah.
Everybody's good with everyone moving forward?
Yep. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Keep it conservative, Buzz. Keep it conservative.
Okay, unfinished business. Second reading of the comprehension discussion for clerk treasurers. Compensation, sorry.
This is actually second reading, it was brought to the council last week. This was an ordinance amendment that would allow the clerk treasurer to receive longevity pay and also the HSA contribution.
Correct.
No changes?
No changes. The first one I gave you is all highlighted red, the changes, and this one is the exact same page, black.
I make a motion to move forward with ordinance 2021-8A and ordinance amending ordinance 2020-11A by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Ayes have it, thank you. What's this other one that needs to be signed?
The resolution,
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that.
That'll probably, Joe probably hit that on his
Oh, okay.
report, or I
All right.
Am I up?
Yep.
Okay. The resolution you're asking about, and I apologize, we didn't get on the agenda, I just got that today. And this is what NDOT is now going to as far as signatures on all the contracts. They're using this DocuSign computerized before they can even start to generate a contract between the town, the LPA, and the and NDOT, because they need to know who that authorized signature person is. So what I'd asked Alex to do is to put together a resolution for the council to allow me to sign those documents. And it would only be for the NDOT projects that are already approved by town council. But this way we can keep the process rolling and I can log in and set up that signature through them.
That's right there.
Yeah, and we put it together. We thought, I originally asked Joe, I was like, well, let's put in the specifics for this contract. And then Joe made the wise suggestion, let's just make it general so that as we get these down the road, so long as nothing changes, Joe can just submit this and move forward.
Well, and with all the projects we got going with the trail projects, there's the inspection contracts, there's the design contracts, and there's like, I think there's 4 or 5 different phases now, the way it's broken down. And we're getting ready to do the Broadway corridor, and I think they've incorporated like 3 different DES numbers into that project, and then the Main Street project, and they also use this for, they also use this for the community crossings. So when we go to apply for the money for the roads and stuff, so that would allow me to sign those contracts. And again,
So that's why it's general, you don't see anything specific in there, but we did have that only for projects that the council has already authorized and approved.
Okay, just like we're looking at the project in October.
Right.
First, and then we're looking over them to give us an okay to move forward. Okay.
And I would not be surprised if they didn't request that we do a new one of these each year.
I'll make a motion to move forward with resolution number 2021-8A, resolution to provide town manager with signature authority for NDOT project contracts and documents by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Ayes have it. Thank you.
And if I can get a signed copy of that this evening, I'll send it to NDOT first thing in the morning so they can finish preparing the contract for the county. Main Street updates. As you probably noticed, they milled the surface up. They plan on being back in Wednesday with the surface down, Wednesday and Thursday if need be. They're pouring the concrete approaches on Main Street there south of Pearl, on both ends of that little island, bump out, or not bump out, but tabletop area. Plaza, I think, a lot of it's called that. Tomorrow they're gonna start in also installing the benches, setting trash cans out. The street lights, I'm told, will not even be here until September 30th, and they're scheduled to install them October 4th and 5th. That's if they're not delayed. So, other than that, anything else on Main Street?
On the Main Street project, we get to do one last walkthrough to make sure that all the little chips, the road breaks and stuff, and
Absolutely.
we hold it to, okay.
Yeah, and in fact, we also, another one of those contracts we have with BLM's inspector that works for the town and for NDOT on this project. And they've got an office right there on Main Street.
Okay.
And they're out there watching quite often, trying to track the numbers down. I meet with him daily. In fact, I was walking the project today and found a few other things I wasn't happy with.
Looks like they got some cracks already in some areas, so.
Yeah, they chipped up the curb pretty bad, so they're gonna have to disguise that somehow, either trim it off or be able to, you know, make it look right when it's surfaces.
Did they ever come up with what they're gonna do over at State Farm Agency, that step up?
They went out, I don't know if it was today or in the last week, and they saw cut the edge of that a little bit better because it looked really nasty. But yeah, what they've elected to do is put a handrail across the front of it. So it's not a 10-inch step, it steps down in the sidewalk.
Okay.
So they would then direct people down the ramp. And I owe Bob a call on that too, because I've talked to him. So I'll call him on that tomorrow.
Yeah, because now it's, when you step down, you won't, most people aren't aware that it's.
Yeah, it's
second,
10 inches,
so.
it's too high for standard stuff.
Alrighty.
And then, I don't know if you've noticed out there on 300 West, around the 96th Street or 1000 area, what we call it, going back toward the power station. They're installing a sewer main that's being put in by the developers, putting in the storage units. There's gonna be just a small piece that goes in between that and the railroad track where we've got a manhole setting now. I've been getting prices on that. That will allow us to get our gravity sewer to the other side of the highway, because we've already got it on the other side of the highway, it's on the tracks, it just needs to be connected right there. So I've been working on getting some cost for that, and I'll come back to the council at the next meeting and ask for approval to go ahead and get that piece tied in. As you know, some of the developers and stuff we've had looking out south of town, just not having that sewer access back to the plant has been a bit of a hindrance, so we're trying to get that built out there.
Okay.
That's all I have.
I see he's not here tonight. Anybody have any questions for Joe? I'm sorry. No. I see he's not here, but it looks like they're moving forward on that project.
This slide.
I haven't been over there yet. I've been too busy to get over and look at it. but
Looked at it,
Everything all right? Okay.
lovely.
Does it look like a slide?
No. Not my ideas. Don't ask me, I wait till it's done to make my final opinion.
Adam's not here tonight. Did he have anything?
Nothing for the agenda.
Clerk treasurer, Missy?
Yeah, I kind of want to address the salary ordinance for 2022. Joe and I would like to get started on that and maybe present it at the next meeting for a first reading. I can tell you what we have available in the budget, and I guess you can decide from there what you want to do. Beth and I have been working on trying to have the police officers' salaries more competitive. I was asked to look at that, and we have come up with some numbers. I'll leave it to you guys what you want to decide, but from when they come in probationary without the academy up to first class officer, we were going to ask for a 12% increase. That would make them competitive with most of the county. And still not, we're making maybe $1,000 off, but that's about all we can sustain.
Okay.
And then for the lieutenant, it would be an 8% increase. And then for the major in chief, if available, 4%. Then for the rest of the departments, we could sustain maybe 2 to 3%. So
is that's not gonna get us close then, to what Greenfield and the sheriff's department paying, is it?
it's gonna be close, but we just can't afford more than 12% right now.
Okay. Well, and just like, it's supply and demand, and sometimes you gotta pay more to get what you gotta,
Yeah.
it's just business.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and I think most people know that. If the demand is there, you gotta pay it. It's just, we'll take a look at it next. So September 7th, you'll have it together. That's gonna be a long meeting.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Well, actually, we won't have anything. We're hoping to get some direction from you on what percentages to put in there so we could create the ordinance.
This includes the utility guys too,
I'm
the
sorry.
town guys.
The 2 to 3% would be all other departments besides police that we could sustain. And that's entirely up to you, what you guys want to do with that. I'm just letting you know that it's there.
I can't make a confident suggestion for an ordinance for next meeting without seeing better numbers. Missy, is this 12% increase taking into account the additional officers?
And the taxes and everything associated with it, it's gonna be about $45,000.
Yeah.
Close to it, not quite, but that's, yeah,
Is that overall or police department one?
or around,
I have some initial concerns about this, but I mean, that's just myself. I'm gonna need to take a look at it, but again, that's just speaking for me.
Right.
Speaking for me.
Right, because I think whether they start them out at 52,000 in Greenfield on the officers?
You'd have to ask Pat on that.
And
I
they
think
just
that's
gave
what
them
we
like
did.
an
Right.
18%.
They did,
raise.
yes,
Yeah.
they just did.
Greenfield was woefully behind in their pay on their police officers, so they made a big jump just to get caught back up to where they were.
Yeah.
It's always been, it doesn't mean it always has to be, but it's always been a struggle. Fortville can't compete with the bigger departments on what
No.
they pay.
Yeah.
And, that's not taking anything away from what our officers do. We've got some of the best group of officers around. But trying to keep up with the next departments, that's always been tough for us and will continue to be. That's a healthy percentage increase that, I would need to get more comfortable with the budget there before. And they deserve every penny of what they earn. I'm not saying they don't, but that's a healthy, substantial increase. And at the expense of basically everybody else.
Well, I want to make a comment on that. And when you said something about when you get police officers this much, then we can only sustain 2 or 3% for everyone else.
Yeah, what was mentioned in the budget workshop was 4%.
Right. And if that was what was budgeted, all the other people they're paid out of other departments. They're not paid out of general. They're paid out of utilities and stuff.
Water, sewer.
So really, what we do with the police officers shouldn't affect the street utility guys so much.
Well, I've always said this, that there's no mobility in these small police departments. A young buck is gonna come in, he's gonna wanna move. A lot of times it's not about the money, it's about the mobility to make captain or detective or head of narcotics. And we don't have that ability here. And Rob, I don't know if I should bring this up, but we talked about this, is combining forces with others to try to, but God, who wants to tackle that animal where we're sharing resources and not, everybody has limited resources. So what happens in businesses buy each other out and they combine, but I don't know how to do it. I've never even thought about it, but to me, McCordsville and us combining our services, because in the future, McCordsville and Fortville will be closer and closer as these neighborhoods start getting closer and closer to each other. And I'm not sure if we can ever compete with anybody, because we will always be small because of the way our growth is gonna be to 234, and then the growth's gonna be out there on 13. It's gonna be the next, you saw it in Fishers, and then it went to Hamilton South, where the mall is, and then the next stop is 69, and 13 is gonna be the next growth area. And I'm not sure, this is just me thinking out of the box. I'm not trying to change anything, but it's just, as I talk to other police departments, gotta start relying more on technology. What we did with those readers is a good thing. It's just thinking out of the box, because in the future, it is gonna be tougher and tougher for us to hold police officers.
Right now, things are so bad, it's so hard to.
Right. And I'm just thinking out of the box. I don't know if it's ever been done anywhere in any other community or any other state where they start consolidating. I know they did it in Marion County with the sheriff's department and them, but I don't think they're still combining. No.
There was some scuttlebutt several years ago about combining, going to Vernon Township Police Department. I mean, that could, be a combination, because you're gonna have McCordsville and Fortville gonna take up 75% of Vernon Township.
And that's what I was thinking. We're getting closer and closer in between these housing additions. Pretty soon, you're gonna have a housing addition, it's gonna be McCordsville, and then the next housing addition is gonna be Fortville. And they're just, there's no separating line. The police officers that get called that night, they're gonna be crisscrossing the whole time. And they do that now. You see them now running over here in McCordsville, and you see Fortville running over there. They're already doing this type of, but that's just me thinking out of the box. If I spoke out of
No, I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Well, and I agree with Tanya, we need to look at the utility guys. See what we can do on their increase.
Since it's so hard to hire people right now, well,
And those guys,
have you got anybody yet?
they don't
Okay.
make any more than the people.
We're gonna have to do something
Yeah,
to make
we
it more
gotta do something
attractive.
to get utility, three guys. I don't
People
know.
just don't wanna work.
I realize.
Well,
That's attractive.
Well, they get the utilities too, it's a tough job, and, it's. the
You're saying
pay's
you
not
want me to
there.
try and
We
find
can't-
more than 4% for utilities?
No, I'm okay with
I'm just-
giving everybody 2% and bumping the utility guys up to 6%. Something like that, if we can do that. I'm not sure everybody needs 4%. I don't know what the cost of living is this year, but they got 3% last year.
Right.
And the cost of living was only 1.5%. I mean, we can't just keep, they can't get 3% every year. Nobody does that.
Okay.
So,
But
I
looking
don't know.
forward to September 7th.
What's my direction?
Oh,
I'm just
I
trying
think
to.
you're on the right line. I mean, because I think it's important for us to do something with the police. I mean, I think we have to. I mean,
we can't keep losing.
look what we have right now. I mean, to me, this is scary.
Well, even if this increase is agreed upon for the police department, we're still almost like 1,000 off of what New Pal pays.
How much? 1,000?
Not quite, but close, yeah.
$1,000 is not a big deal, I want to
No,
think.
but New Pal's one of the smaller, I mean, they're smaller than us,
yeah.
so.
I mean, we're always gonna have that turnover issue, I think, too, but I think that right now, to try to get people in here, we're gonna have to do something.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know what the right answer is. I can't hire people,
Well,
so I
and to keep-
don't have the answer.
We
but-
can't keep sending them to the academy and buying their uniforms and then they leave. How many first-year officers do we have? How many officers is that right now?
First class officers?
That's first class, huh? Make that change.
The first class officer there's Derek Archer,
Okay.
there's Ryan Runyon, who else is left? Diane Graffiti. Well, she might be second class still. But then Mark Lyons is lieutenant, Derek Shelley's assistant chief, and then Chief Bratton. Because Zach Peters getting ready, he'll be gone end of August. He's first class, but we're losing him.
So, as Chief's not here tonight to ask him some of these questions too, is how many times are we responding out of the town limits to the Vernon Township? I know I talked to Brad Burkhart, and he says they do have a sheriff. He's usually hovering somewhere around McCord's, not Mohawk area. But then they're not able to run on anything in this area sometimes just because they're out at the highway or out on 70 or something. So I'd like to know how many times we run out in the Vernon Township area with our police officers.
I will know that there was times that when they would get a run out in the county or the township and our officers would go out, they would let me know that the county did not have an officer anywhere near this part of the county.
Okay.
And are the officers leaving strictly for pay? I mean, is
We know that for
increasing
sure.
pay going
But
to
again,
A, keep
they-
someone or B?
She's doing,
She's gonna do some exit
I'm-
interviews, I think. We're gonna try to.
But unfortunately, with today's environment, I don't think being a police officer is,
Not very attractive
Not
for anybody,
attractive.
so I think that's even making it worse.
Did you ever get anybody for the street department, Joe?
yeah, we're still looking. We've interviewed a few, we have some candidates.
My other question, as we're talking about a 12% increase, I love the police departments, don't get me wrong. 6 months ago, we were talking about that we didn't have any money. So I'm just curious, how did our budget increase so that now the police department could get 12% when before we couldn't even squeak out anything to get new officers? So He's been begging for 10 years. They've been asking for more money for officers. And now all of a sudden, we've got money for
Seeing a
it.
kickback from our growth. That's, I mean, that's
That's
basically
part
what
of
it's
it, and then
boiling
the
down
other was
to.
the grant, the money that we got, wasn't it?
Well, part of that, yes.
Yeah.
So we're in a position where we can finally do something. And
And
I've
it's
been asked to
sustainable.
look at it.
And it's
Yes,
sustainable.
it's sustainable.
That's my only
Beth and
fear,
I
is that
would
where's this
not
money coming
agree to
from
anything.
and can we maintain
It
it?
should only get better.
If the council would want to wait till like next meeting and think about it, but if you could give us some direction on percentage or something in order to put together a salary ordinance, because there's a lot of numbers in there and you have to calculate each one of them and you do them different ways. So having those percentages or dollar amounts to be able to have an ordinance for you to consider the next meeting or the meeting after that would be helpful. For me, just taking a guess at it, it's not.
Just start at what you've got here. Let's start there.
Yeah, do me a favor, do the police officers, because when I gotta hire employees, I gotta pay what the market will bear, okay? So, to write it up two different ways, get the police officers so we can get them in the door, get some police officers. But then everybody else just, give us like a 3% and then maybe a 2% for here, maybe 4% for the street department, and move those numbers so we could get some people to hire in. It doesn't seem like we're having difficulties keeping the office staff, okay? But if we can't get qualified employees to come in for the street department, then there's a problem there. We gotta just pay what the market will bear, and that is it. And so,
Is pay the problem though? I'm not
Well,
willing to say that that's the problem.
Well, right now,
Right
what
now.
else is gonna attract them,
I
really?
don't know that
Because,
pay is.
because the reason why they're not working is because they have money in their pocket.
well,
So,
the police department, you still have to pay what the market will bear.
Right.
They're gonna go to Greenfield, if we're at 42,000 and they're paying them
they're not gonna
52,000,
go look at us.
they're gonna go to Greenfield, especially if Greenfield is saying, hey, we're hiring, and they're like, well, I'm gonna go. That's human nature. You do the same thing in your job. You would
I'm
go,
just saying I need to see more numbers rather than
okay.
being on board with saying, yep, do it.
What are you talking?
I'd like to see comparisons based on kind of some of the stuff you've already talked about. Let's see what the other area police departments are paying.
Okay,
So we'll know what that comparison is. How far behind have we fallen in the past 3 to 5 years, right?
It's
I know-
like 2 years we've fallen behind.
At
It's
one
just
point in
like
time,
crazy.
we made a nice big jump, but now are we that woefully behind now? I don't know, I can't say, right? So I'd like to see that. I mean, that's a big chunk to swallow, and I know for one, I'm not a fan of just because we have it, and I'm not suggesting that's that's going on here, but just because we have it, let's go to the max and stress our budget. I mean, I'd like to have a cushion in there, right? Just because it's coming in, why do we go to the cap? And then we're gonna be, how many more years are we gonna say, oh, well, we don't have it in the
I
budget?
don't think we'd be doing that if we weren't losing people.
I'm tired of saying, I think we all can say, well, it's just not in the budget, we can't do it. We finally have our growth catching up with us. Let's have some cushion to do some things, rather than saying, oh, it's here, take it to the max.
Right,
That's
I agree.
That's not a fun way to operate.
I agree.
And
I think
that's
why we're doing
what it sounds like here, and I'm not convinced that just saying, oh, let's throw more money is gonna solve the problem. And I don't know that any of us have that answer. But I still have an issue looking at this and saying, okay, we love our police officers, I mean, we were giving them more officers even, right? So I'm just saying, let's take a measured approach, 2 to 3% for some, 12% for others, 8%. I mean, it's kind of all over. I mean, who's to say that this person's more deserving than this next person?
I don't
Well,
think
no,
there's
it's what the
anything wrong
market
with
will
that.
bear. It's
Yeah.
what the market
I
will
don't think
bear.
there's anything wrong with
That's-
that. I mean, I don't think you should just look at a whole department and say, everybody gets this, because it's not like
I
that. That's not
100%,
reality.
I 100% agree, but if we're gonna do that, then it's gotta be performance-based, and that's a conversation that we've approached.
Well, right now, I think it's need-based, not performance-based.
Um,
So, I mean, there's a need, the need here is more severe than it's been in the
Right.
past. The way I see it.
Well, there again, if you've got employees and you're keeping this department, but on this department, you're starting to lose people and you notice, hey, the market on this bears, they're paying more, you have to make those adjustments. Now, these people over here, if they're happy and they're not, there's nowhere for them to go to make that much money, then they're not gonna leave. It's just, they're not.
Trying to replace them is not easy.
Yeah,
No, it's
that's what I mean,
not.
they're not gonna go anywhere because their idea of the benefits of here is, okay, I get this holiday off, I get 12 holidays off a year. There's some kind of holiday going on, plus their vacation time and all this stuff, and they're happy with that job. But then all of a sudden, we got a problem over here where, okay, we gotta pay these, I don't know, surgeons more money because they're going to
I
different
understand what you're
hospitals.
saying.
So it's just what the market will bear. So it doesn't make sense to give some people that, yes, give them a raise, but it doesn't help us to give them a raise when
The cost of living, how much is cost of living? What is it now?
It has
What was it this
gone.
year?
It probably did
Is
go
it
up.
better what it is this year?
It was, I think it was 1.4 in 2020. 2021, I saw anything, I was looking on there.
It's been all over the place.
Yeah, I looked, there was one that said 1.6 to 2.8.
According to it's before Biden or after Biden.
Mm-hmm.
No, seriously, as far as your inflation's concerned.
So,
Okay.
I'd be interested to know how much it costs, Patrick, to send them to the academy, to put them in uniforms. I mean, how much of the
I
month?
thought it was around 100,000 is what
Well, that's
Chief
what
Canaris
you're
told me.
thinking.
I would think that would be with a new police car and everything.
I would think so, yeah.
That's first tier for
Yeah.
everything already.
But they don't always all get a new police car.
Oh, no, they're,
Okay.
they have cars.
But that's a short term. I mean, whenever we have officers, we have to look at adding police cars at some point.
Mhm.
That's just kicking it down the road.
Well, yeah, if we're adding, but we're
Right.
trying to keep what we've got.
Do like 2 or 3 different things, I guess, at the vacancy. Let's see.
And we'll go from there. Okay.
Yeah, go from
Do what you've got proposed,
extreme.
and I would say do what we've done historically, the 3% across the board. Those are the two probably that make the most sense,
3% across the board for police as well?
across the board. I'm just saying historically what we've done across the board, that's what we've done.
That's not
But the
what
problem,
we
the
want to
problem
do
is
this
the
year.
market's
What we're
changed,
saying.
but
Just show it that way, that's all right.
all right,
Yeah, that's all right.
do a 3%, but then I'd like to see us be more competitive, or in the police department, or we need to come up with different ideas how we're gonna, either we go with some other idea that the Vernon Township, where we spread the cost out for policing, or we continue losing officers, because $10,000 more a year is a lot of money. And you're going to a bigger department where there's more mobility to move up. A lot of young guys are aggressive. They want to move up.
Maybe we can get Patrick to look into the township thing. I don't know who else to look into it. I mean, I don't know where to start.
That's a big
That's a big.
Yeah.
undertaking.
Right, and that's why, but this idea, we gotta throw ideas out. We can't just keep doing the same thing and expecting
it's
the
convenient.
same or a different result, and we're continue doing the same thing. It doesn't work that way. Give it 3% each year for the next, it doesn't make sense. We've got to make a change, or we got to do something different, because in business, you would be out of business the next year. You got to make adjustments, and that's all I'm saying is that $10,000 is a big chunk. It might even be $11,000 difference in pay. I don't see how you get a police officer to work for $1,000 a week. I really don't. I mean, I don't see how you
The
get
way it is now.
not to
yeah,
put your
I
life on the line.
This isn't really my area of expertise, but I have seen this discussion in a number of communities, and one in Greenfield, because they were losing their officers left and right. You know, it's the same issue, but I know one thing they did was they had them sign commitments where if they didn't stay for X amount of time after you invest all that money in the academy, because you're basically paying their salary. Does it take a year to get through the academy? Or
No, it's 17 weeks.
12 weeks, 16 weeks?
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, say
maybe
16.
17 months.
And I believe we have something like that in place, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
You already have that, where they have to rebate back their benefit or part of their
And I-
benefit or something.
I just want to be clear, I'm not saying, my concern comes strictly from a budget perspective. Okay, I'm not saying that they're not deserving of everything we could pay them. I just want to make absolutely certain of that, because that just needs to be clear. So, from a budgetary perspective, the police department, it makes up the majority of our operating budget. And so it's continuing to increase to keep up with the departments around us. Now, keep in mind, we're in a unique position here in Fortville. We're surrounded by higher paying departments in every direction essentially. So proportionately to the percentage of the budget, is that sustainable? That's where my concern comes from. And all I'm saying is I don't have enough information to make that determination.
No, that's
And
fair.
I want to
Yeah.
see the information too, because it might be that we have to do less or do more with less. We've got to come up with
Well,
a
that's something
scenario.
that I can say, that's something I can say with pride, that, again, it's not me having to do it, but everybody that works for this town has always done, since I've known them, is we can all be proud of, we've always seemingly done more with less. From the guys in the street department, to the police officers, to, I mean, look at all the number of permits and stuff we're doing now, just with all that stuff. And we've always done more with less, and they've always worn multiple hats.
Everybody wears the multiple.
Absolutely.
I-
So couldn't be prouder of everybody for that. My concern strictly from a budgetary perspective.
I totally agree with you. I
It's one
totally,
place to start.
it's just that what we need to start thinking out of the box, because again, do we run with only 4 police officers? I mean,
We
that's,
can't do that.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
But if you can't hire anybody in,
It's a
you're
problem.
gonna have to go with 4 police
I
officers. And what does that look like?
Here's what I'm saying, is I'm not certain that matching, it certainly makes it easy, well, I shouldn't say easier. It makes it maybe more of an option, but if I'm somebody looking to start, do I start and the pay is essentially the same to your earlier concern? Do I go to a Fortville? Maybe I do if I live here in the area. Or do I go to a larger apartment where there's much more upward mobility if the pay is somewhat the same?
Well, the problem is larger departments are taking officers from other towns that's already got the academy, so they don't have to pay for that.
Mhm.
So we're losing officers. It's not the matter of the new people who want to be a police
I
officer.
understand. I think that is I guess that is something, what I'm hearing is that's something that Fortville should no longer accept, because I think that is, for towns our size, that is part of the cost of doing business. Do I like it? Of course I don't. Do I want to see it diminished? Of course I do. But, this is something that Kenara and I, we talked, it's so in-depth about, and it's not a new issue. It is, how do we keep our officers? How do we retain them? And just throwing more money at it is not the answer. Maybe to some it might help, but it's not just, throwing more in the budget.
You're just not gonna get any applicants to come in the door.
I think that is something that's very widespread. That's not just isolated to Fortville Police Department.
Right.
So,
But that's why Greenfield raised it, and then all of a sudden they start taking,
yeah.
they raised it, and all of a sudden now they're getting officers.
So Greenfield was 10 years behind.
Right.
So, I mean, that was,
And
we're
the
not,
sheriff's department's raised it.
they were very far behind as well. So, I mean, I don't know that is a good argument, but,
Paul's,
We were making more than green.
well,
right.
We
and
were
then,
making more than Greenfield and Sheriff.
I thought Patrick told me starting pay for Fortville is almost 40,000. Starting pay at Greenfield was like 50 something,
That's-
52, 54, I don't remember exactly, but, I mean, that's a big
It
difference.
is a big difference.
You're forgetting a major factor in this. The 1973 property tax freeze from Fortville made a budgetary error. This town has never caught up. And it has always kept the civil town, the tax rate, not utilities, down. And they passed a law in the legislature, it's called the Fortville Bill. And,
We've got a few of those.
yeah, and it helped Fortville get out of it a little bit. But that's one thing. And also back in the eighties, I don't know how many of you remember Dick Poe when he was town marshal. He went to the legislature to present a bill, and several other town marshals and police chiefs, small towns in Indiana, went in. If a larger department, if you had an officer and they went through training and you paid them $20,000, let's just say. And within the first year, Greenfield came to Fortville and hired that officer. Greenfield had to pay Fortville $20,000. Well, your big departments, they lobbied that. That got killed. I mean, they went after those senators and reps. That bill didn't get anywhere. But there's two major things that the property tax raise at 73, this town has never caught up and never will.
I guess my last thing, that's why I chose history, because historically, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but I absolutely, and Joe and I famously going back for it, I don't think that's the right way to do it. But historically, that's what we've done. Right, so,
So
no?
you're saying don't even look at 12% increase?
Oh,
for the
sure, do it.
officers?
Yeah, absolutely. Do it as proposed, like you said, but then.
Look at it a
we
few
were
different
saying-
ways.
we were
That'll give us
saying
a place to start,
try
and
a
then we
couple
can
different
decide.
options.
Right, and then I would at least maybe talk, you're on the police commission, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you guys talked about that in your meetings?
As far as pay,
Yeah.
Paul, that's not really come up as part of a major topic of conversation, other than kind of what we're discussing right now. I mean,
Yeah, it hasn't, because all of a sudden we're losing really 4 officers here within the last 6 weeks.
And I think Katie
We don't
Weaver
meet
was
that
gonna do
often.
exit interviews.
Just really talk about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm really concerned with those few officers that we have, that they're gonna get burned out and find somewhere else to go.
Right, right.
When we just approved this new office,
Right.
we were just making it better, then it all just fell apart.
Well, and Pat has said that it's really hard to get quality candidates.
Yeah.
You know, they,
It's true with everything.
Who wants to be a cop today?
Nobody.
Who wants to be a teacher? You know?
and
So when you talked about that years ago, the Vernon Township, who brought that up in the beginning?
That came up
Yeah.
in the discussion.
I forget, it was a discussion, probably over a few beers, but anyway, I mean, that just threw out a possibility, years down the line and that. And there's, some states around, I think Ohio, Pennsylvania, they have township police departments. I mean,
Indiana.
Yeah.
in
It might
Indiana,
be where
they want to
we
get rid of
spread
the
the-
townships, but
We can spread the costs out and get more coverage, because if there's a call in the Vernon Township, our police officers are gonna run on it.
I mean,
Even if they're not in the town.
we're strapped right now. I mean,
Oh, I know, everybody, they're strapped down too, so
Yeah.
it's like,
let me ask this, does the the town have an impact fee? I remember a discussion years ago, Joe, you remember, about impact fee on all these
new houses.
new houses
Not for
there.
safety.
Huh? And some of that money
Yeah.
needs to go to public safety.
Yeah.
And
Now, we do have one on Mount Vernon North. They do pay a little bit, because of the police department, but it's very small. It's very minor.
What does McCordsville have, impact fees on their?
yes, and
Obviously
I
they
think
do.
they raised it.
don't
I'd
know
like
if
to
it was
tell you
from public
$3,400.
So how much?
That's
is
where,
I don't know.
that's where we use the PUD to negotiate when developers come in, so we don't necessarily get impact fees from just the houses, but we do set up an agreement with the PUD, and then we can work in public safety funds as well.
A little more flexible.
I mean, I think it's worth public safety in, because these people moving out, they want the same services downtown, and it takes money.
Yeah.
Well, and the problem with that is once they built those new homes, we're giving them services immediately, and we're not collecting tax dollars for a year.
Right. And that's old people's paying the bill. Older residents.
Keep in mind, impact fees are a one-time shot in the arm, they're not
Yeah,
ongoing.
you know,
Well, that's just to get you over that first year tax.
But it gives you some money to,
Right,
Help out.
Missy and I have had these conversations, the first year, that to me is, I've never been, well, obviously I'm concerned with getting the first year, Missy, you and I talked about this at length. That first year, we can always tighten the belt, you can get us up over the hump, it's years 2 and beyond. that's the part that I've always tried to get my arms around and get comfortable with. If we can be comfortable with years 2 and beyond, then yeah, let's chat.
That's what she said, it's sustainable, what she's.
I would not have put anything out there. You guys know Beth and I are very conservative.
I
If it
understand.
was not
I
doable, I
understand.
wouldn't.
I would like to see, I'd like to know what that cushion is. Are we going right up to our max and where we're not gonna be, our cushion is gone? So here, next year, when we're losing people or whatever, the next thing that comes up, I don't know, I'm not saying that lightly, because there's always something. And we'll say, oh, we can't, because we're strapped, be it for any reason.
Well, it's-
Circuit breakers, we've increased salary, we've had to pay for, you mean, Joe, you know, right?
and
I just,
Patrick asked for how many police officers this last round, which would have gotten us to, how many officers?
12.
And then we've lost,
Or three.
okay, so do your numbers include getting those 4 back? And he wanted
Includes
to
12
get
officers.
That's okay.
Yeah,
so it's 12
Included.
officers, and then he's gonna come back and want more officers.
He said he wouldn't, but you can.
Oh, they always say
You
that.
can nail him when he comes back, Beth. I don't know what to tell you. I'm just
I
trying
think
to
that
get a
cushion
freaking
should
salary
expand
ordinance
to
together.
15, because I know he's gonna wanna come back.
Well, as we grow that.
This
might happen, but I
January,
don't
pull up
think
a chair
I
conversation.
don't think that'll happen that soon.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's gonna drop really good. Yeah, I don't think it'll happen that soon, but eventually it will, because we grow. The more we grow, he's gonna have, so.
Yeah, and again, how many of the employees of the police department are paid out in general?
We probably.
Oh,
should
you're
know that,
asking me,
too.
sorry, I'm
We-
like,
we
just
should
about
probably-
tuned out.
We should probably know that.
Well, the utility end of it, I know we've got.
I'm
brought
tired
this-
of
you
talking
brought
about this
this up.
now.
You brought this up.
Y'all are on different
We
things.
don't even get taxed on it from our status, I think, well, so it's all tax generated, or utility generated funds.
We have 5 employees paid out of water, 5 out of sewer, 1 out of storm. The rest, well, Joe's a mixture of all of them. But, then the rest is general.
Which includes the police.
Mm-hmm.
All right, be ready for a long meeting next,
Right.
September 7th, okay? A lot to discuss. All righty. Chief's not here. Alex,
I don't have anything else for you, unless you have questions for me.
public comment? Come on up, state your name.
Okay, Toasty, been around here for a while. In this waterworks expansion, is there any works in it to put another tower up northwest part?
Is there any discussion to put up another water, do we need it?
Any studies that we've got doesn't show that there's a water tower needed out there. Besides that, out there is citizens in that area, and I think our citizens is just beyond us, Cynthia Road. We're not going beyond that, so we're,
Yeah, right.
we're going.
But I'm talking about out here at Rayford's
Yeah,
and
that's
Wilson's and all this out there.
Where as
across
far
the
as
road
we're
from
going
me.
right now, and all those hydrants out there have got as much volume, if not more, than some up here in town. And we are actually have got more volume on our hydrants out there, than citizens got more pressure. Because we're actually talking to citizens, I'm talking to citizens about doing a emergency connection out there.
Right.
In case there's anything that goes down on our end or on their end, where we can still, feed back and forth. And one of their biggest concern is they didn't have enough pressure on their end to serve our 55 pressure that we serve.
I just think of all them houses out there. I'm no engineer, but I like to use a little common sense, and I know when everybody flushes, that water pressure will go down.
And that's where the main sizes are what's helping that. Now, I won't say that the whole system doesn't start to go down, because that is part of the need for our new water plant, to help take care of the customer. But as far as a tower in that area or larger mains, I think we got that covered.
I mean, I think you got the right size mains, I just think you need a tower. Personal opinion.
Well, we've had the engineers do hydraulic tests on it. They run the hydraulics on all the pipe sizes. and
Yeah, but do
everything.
you trust every engineer?
Well, it's been done by multiple engineers.
Who's citizens?
Cynthia Road when you go west.
And again, I think you guys need to really seriously look on this impact fee and jack it up for public safety and schools. Personal opinion.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful opinion.
Yeah.
Town council comments, Libby,
I'm good.
Diane, Peggy,
I'm good.
Robert?
I'm good for now.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve and sign vouchers.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Ayes have it.
Chris comes back and our meeting goes to 8:45. I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Have a nice evening, guys.
Made a replay.
Yeah.
How many years
It
ago?
grows.